Your wife doesn't always leave work on time. Ask Javi. That anonymous note, just a few scribbled words, forced me to put a GPS on her car, follow the trail of her lies, watch her walk into a cheap hotel with him, and finally end our marriage before she could make up another tired excuse. Last Tuesday, I found the thing. It was a sheet of paper folded in half, tucked right under my windshield wiper. No envelope, nothing formal. At first, I thought it was a parking ticket or just more flyers for that goddamn pizza place. But it wasn't. It was a note, handwritten with a cheap blue pen. It said, exactly, your wife doesn't always leave work when she says she does. Ask about some guy named Javi, the bald guy. There was no signature, no context, no explanation, nothing but those cold sentences. The first thing I did was look around quickly, paranoid, as if the person who left it was still there, watching me, but the parking garage was empty. I read it 3 times. My hands were shaking, holding the paper. It was 7:20 in the evening. I had just left the gym, still sweaty, my mind miles away thinking about tomorrow's meeting. A sentence like that was the last thing I expected. I didn't know how to breathe, much less react. I got into the car, locked the doors instinctively, and shoved the paper into the glove compartment. I tried to shut it out. I forced myself not to dwell on it. Clara, my wife, had supposedly been working from 8 to 5 o'clock at a tax consultancy near Attacha for about a year now. She claimed she had to stay late on Tuesdays and Thursdays because of a new schedule and some internal meetings. I never questioned it. Why would I? But after seeing that note, this Javi, the bald guy, started buzzing in my head like a headache I couldn't shake. I am not, and never have been, a paranoid person. I don't snoop through phones or imagine scenarios. But that note came from somewhere. Someone took the time to write it out and put it directly on my car, in my assigned spot in our community garage. This wasn't just a random suspicion anymore. It felt like a deliberate, calculated warning. That night, I kept quiet. Clara came home just like always. Office clothes, her hair bun slightly loose, smelling of that expensive perfume she loves. She kicked off her heels at the entrance and asked what we should have for dinner. As if nothing. As if Javi, the bald guy, didn't exist in her world. We had an omelet and salad and watched some show. We talked about normal, mundane things, but I wasn't really listening. My mind had clicked into high alert observation mode. I began noticing every tiny detail, things I'd casually overlooked before. The exact time she got home, how long it took her to answer me when I spoke, what she did with her handbag the moment she walked in the door. I became a fake version of myself in my own home, smiling on cue, making dumb jokes. But inside, I felt sick. Everything was churning. 3 agonizing days crawled by. On Friday afternoon, after handing Clara the car keys so she could go to the mall with her friend Marta, I decided to run a little test of my own. I grabbed one of those rented electric scooters and zipped straight over to the underground parking garage of her office building. She had told me she would be leaving work at 6:30 p.m. I got there by 6 o'clock. I stood at a safe distance on the opposite sidewalk, pulling my cap low over my eyes. At 6:24 p.m., I saw Clara emerge. She wasn't alone. She was walking right next to a bald man, maybe 10 years her senior, wearing a backpack and an untucked shirt. They were talking intimately, leaning in close. He made a wide gesture with his hand. She threw her head back and laughed. It wasn't just a polite office chuckle. It was that genuine, silly laugh, that spark I hadn't heard from her since the beginning of our relationship, the kind you absolutely cannot fake. I'm not a fool. I didn't play the wounded husband. I didn't follow them immediately. I didn't rush over. I didn't take pictures. I just walked back home without confronting her. And in that awful moment, I knew I had to do something drastic. The issue was no longer just about Clara seeing someone. The real, gut-wrenching problem was that she had been methodically lying to me for weeks, maybe months, taking my trust and using it as a prop for her routine, for her whole secret life. That level of deception, that's something I absolutely refused to let slide. On Saturday, I woke up before her, which was highly unusual for me. Clara was always the one up early, saying she wanted to make the most of the weekend. But that morning, she was still asleep in bed, her face completely peaceful. I watched her for a moment from the doorway. It was almost impossible to reconcile the years we'd shared with the idea that this woman was capable of hiding something so corrosive. I walked into the kitchen silently. I made coffee only for myself and sat at the table without turning on any lights. No TV, no music, no scrolling on my phone. I just sat there, planning my next move. I'm not impulsive, but I'm also not the type to wait around hoping things magically fix themselves. I still didn't have ironclad proof of anything. Just that note and the sight of her leaving work with the bald guy. But that was more than enough to confirm a massive deception was happening behind my back. I got dressed in street clothes and went out for a walk without telling her. I left a note claiming I'd gone to get bread, though I had no intention of coming back with a full bag. I wandered the neighborhood aimlessly, desperate to clear my head. I went over the possibilities, focusing on what I truly needed to find out. It wasn't about whether she cheated anymore, but about understanding how she managed it, for how long, how often, and with what terrifying sense of normalcy she could crawl into bed next to me afterward, pretending everything was fine. That was the truly sickening part. The performance, the daily betrayal. I couldn't live with that doubt lodged in my gut like a cold stone. I got home around 10 o'clock. Clara was up. She was sitting on the living room couch in her bathrobe, scrolling on her laptop. She greeted me with her usual tone, utterly composed. I said I'd felt like walking before the streets filled up. She just nodded and looked back at her screen. I sat across from her and remained completely silent. She glanced up. "Is something wrong with you?" she asked, using that tone people use when they already know the answer but are waiting for you to say it. "No, I'm just thinking." "About what?" "About us." She didn't wait for a reply, looking back at the laptop. I didn't push her. I preferred to just watch. I had already decided I would not ask her directly. I needed to catch her red-handed, giving her no space for invented excuses, knowing exactly how far she'd gone. That's why, mid-morning, I casually mentioned having a big meeting in Alcala on Monday at 5 o'clock, saying I'd have to stay late at the office to finish up work. I said it naturally, without blinking, like it was the most ordinary thing. She just nodded. When I asked if it bothered her, she replied no, that she could finally go have a drink with Marta or her cousin, whom she hadn't seen in ages. I didn't ask exactly who she'd be meeting. I let her provide the details of her own alibi. On Monday, I left the house at 8 a.m. as if going to work, but I didn't go to any office. I spent the day in a downtown co-working space, using my laptop to do some serious investigating. First, I pulled up her office building on Google Maps. I studied the nearby streets, the quiet cafes, the hidden doorways. Then I went looking for Javi, the bald guy. I didn't have a last name, but on her firm's website, there was a staff list with names and photos. There he was, Javier Hill, head of taxation, completely bald, with a stiff, unnatural smile in his profile picture. He looked like an arrogant guy in his 40s, one of those who thinks he's hilarious, but isn't. I searched his social media. His LinkedIn profile was open. He'd been working there for 4 years. Confirmed. That was definitely the bald guy. At 5:15 p.m., I was positioned near her building. I sat at a sidewalk terrace with a beer, pretending to wait for someone. I had my phone resting on the table, the camera pointed right at the office exit. I was ready to record if she dared to appear with him again. 15 minutes, half an hour. Nothing. At 6:10 p.m., they walked out. This time, they were even closer. She was laughing loudly, actually touching his arm. He looked at her like he had just won the lottery. They walked to the corner and turned down a side street. I got up fast and followed them at a safe distance from the opposite sidewalk. They ducked into a small bar, one of those with a dark, private room in the back. I couldn't risk following them inside. I stayed on the sidewalk, pretending to look deeply engrossed in a mobile phone shop window. They emerged an hour later. No kiss, no obvious public touching, but she gave him a small pat on the chest before crossing the street. That was enough. It wasn't about whether they'd slept together yet. It was about confirming that this was absolutely not a casual coffee between colleagues. I raced home before her. I showered, made dinner, and sat on the couch pretending total ignorance. When Clara walked through the door, she gave me the whole spiel. She'd been with Marta, they'd had a drink and a slice of pizza, and then went window shopping for clothes. I asked if they bought anything. "No," she said, "we just looked." "How was your meeting in Alcala?" she asked me while removing her makeup in the bathroom mirror. "Fine. A bit dull, but done. I haven't eaten yet. I was waiting for you." We sat and ate our omelet again. She acted exactly as she always did, completely innocent. As if she hadn't just spent an hour in a dark bar with a man who could make her laugh more genuinely than I had in months. There was no sex that night, or for the rest of the week. Clara had excuses. She was tired, she had a headache, her back hurt. I'd just nod and give her a kiss on the forehead. I didn't push. I didn't want her body if it wasn't offered with sincerity. I didn't care if she showered with me, or if she slept in my arms. Even 10 centimeters away, I felt utterly, devastatingly alone. That Friday, I decided it was time to level up. I couldn't live in this agonizing limbo anymore. I went to an electronics store and bought a small GPS tracking device for cars. It was simple to use. Place it in a discreet spot and track the vehicle from your phone. I installed it in Clara's car that night while she was sleeping soundly. The next day, I told her I had a lunch with some work friends and left early, but really, I stayed close to home, phone in hand, waiting for her to move. At 12:30 p.m., she started the engine. I watched the blue dot move across the map in real time. She was not heading to Marta's, or the mall, or anywhere she'd ever mentioned. She drove toward the outskirts on the M30, straight for an industrial park filled with those sketchy roadside hotels. The moment I saw that trajectory, I knew everything else was just window dressing. When I saw the blue GPS dot stop right next to a cheap hotel in that industrial park, I felt the air in my car get thick. It wasn't an explosion of anger or shock. It was a cold, quiet certainty settling inside me, like knowing a vase is broken even before it hits the floor. I didn't call anyone. I didn't scream. I didn't punch the steering wheel. I just kept driving calmly and parked about 100 meters away, close enough to confirm who was going in, far enough not to bump into Clara unexpectedly. There were no familiar cars. So, I did the unthinkable. I waited. A taxi arrived 20 minutes later. I noticed the driver smoking by the door, but my eyes were on the passenger. It was him, the bald guy, with his same backpack. He got out, paid, and went straight into the hotel without looking around. No hugs or kisses in the street were necessary. I had all the proof I needed, the kind that confirmed Clara was not having a casual coffee with Marta or attending a meeting or doing any normal Saturday activity. She was there, with him. To think anything else now would be pure self-deception. Javier, the bald guy, entered at 5:48 p.m. I decided to wait an hour and 10 minutes. I still don't know why that exact time. Maybe I needed to think before I acted, or maybe a tiny, desperate part of me wanted to give Clara a window to emerge quickly, clinging to the delusion that it was all a huge mistake. But no one I knew came out. At 7 p.m. sharp, my strategy was crystal clear. I wasn't going to storm in or cause a scene in the lobby. I wasn't going to let this turn into some public spectacle that they could twist into their favor. I wouldn't give Clara any room to manipulate the narrative. I needed control and precision, and the confrontation had to happen on my own turf. Our home, the place where she pretended everything was perfect. I drove back in silence and began putting the final pieces into place. I'm no detective, but I know the fastest way to corner a liar is to deny them time to construct their next deception. That meant staying calm and waiting for her to come back, absolutely confident that her lie was still intact. Clara got home at 9:10 p.m., exactly 2 hours after Javier had entered the hotel. She came in with her clothes tidy, her hair immaculate, looking exactly as if nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. She claimed Marta dropped her off at the subway, and she'd run into her cousin at a coffee shop, which is why her plan got extended. She then mentioned she was hungry and asked if there were any leftovers from last night's dinner, all with her usual, sickening naturalness. I watched her open the fridge, completely unaware that I already knew the entire, ugly truth. I told her there was pasta and sauce, and she said, "Perfect." We sat at the table and ate. We talked about trivialities, my work, the raised rent on her cousin's apartment, a problem with a neighbor. It was all so agonizingly normal, it made me feel disgusted. When we finished, I said in a quiet, even voice, "Clara, I actually don't have to go to the office tomorrow. Just letting you know in case you wanted to do something together." She replied that she had a lot of papers to review, but she would try to make time. I said nothing else. We went to bed. She fell asleep quickly. I didn't sleep at all that night. I just stared at the ceiling, reviewing the plan, going over every detail so I wouldn't stumble at the key moment. On Sunday, I got up before her again and went to the living room. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and created a document detailing the exact dates she had left work late over the last month. I cross-referenced those dates with the minimal data I'd already gotten from the car's GPS. The matches were there. Then I wrote a list of questions in a notebook. They weren't questions begging for an explanation, but sharp points designed to pin her against the wall, forcing her to choose between the truth and a new lie. I didn't want a forced story. I just wanted to see her face when she realized I knew absolutely everything. At 11 a.m., she woke up and sat on the couch. She said good morning and complained of a slight headache. I brought her coffee, and she accepted. She drank it for 5 minutes without looking at me much. And when she placed the cup down, I told her, "We need to talk." I saw her shoulders instantly tense up, as if the phrase already carried the weight of doom, but she tried to stay composed. "What's wrong?" she asked. "I just want you to tell me the truth," I replied, holding her gaze. "About what?" "About Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturday." She frowned. She made that quick, calculating face she always makes when she thinks she can talk her way out of a minor argument. "It wouldn't work this time." "I don't understand what you mean," she insisted. "I'll say it clearly. The bald guy from work, the hotel, and the industrial park, the fake schedules. Saturday afternoon." The atmosphere in the room felt toxic. I watched her swallow hard, tilting her neck slightly to the left, trying to buy herself a few seconds. I didn't move. For about 15 awful seconds, she just sat there. Then she whispered, "Javier is a colleague. We've only had coffee. I don't know what you're talking about. The car's GPS says otherwise. And I personally watched him walk into that hotel 2 days ago." She froze completely. Her breathing hitched, quick and shallow. She tried to rush out a new defense. "I went to a work meeting in a private room. It's not what you think." "Give me the client's name." Silence. "Give it to me. Clients leave invoices. If there was a meeting, there will be a document. And if there's a document, it can be traced." Her composure finally shattered. She looked at me with pure rage. She jumped up from the couch. "You're spying on me." "I am observing you." "Yes," after an anonymous note told me to ask about a certain Javi, the bald guy. "I didn't write that note." She started pacing the living room, frantic, as if trying to suck in air. She wasn't shouting, but her voice was tight. "This is insane. You can't trust a piece of paper left on your car. You have absolutely no proof of anything. And you have no explanation for anything." Then she broke. She sank back down, put her hands over her face, and started to cry. It wasn't a melodramatic sob. It was a muffled, uncomfortable cry, The sound of someone who knows they're trapped. When she finally managed to speak, it was just a raw whisper. I didn't want to hurt you. I don't know how it started. I don't know what to tell you. I didn't ask you why. I asked you since when and how far it went. She didn't answer, just stared at the table. I let the silence hang for a solid minute. Then I told her, don't look for excuses. I'm not here to hear a story. I'm here to decide what to do with you. She pleaded with me to listen, said she still loved me, that everything just got out of hand. I told her to save the nice phrases, because they were utterly worthless now. She apologized over and over, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. I just watched her, trying to comprehend how a person can maintain a lie for so long. She asked if we could talk later, said she needed time to think. I told her there would be no later, that the moment for consequences had arrived, and from this point forward, nothing would ever be the same. And right there, in the living room of our house in Madrid, Clara finally understood that everything had irrevocably changed. After that terrible conversation, Clara tried to simply slide back into our routine, as if her half-confession was enough to rewind the last few months and find some safe harbor. But I was gone. I became an observer in my own house. I ate breakfast, had dinner, and slept next to her, but we shared nothing more than the physical space. I didn't yell. I didn't insult her. I made no scenes. I preferred to let her mounting discomfort become her punishment. I let the silence force her to realize her game was over, and the easy part of hiding her betrayal was finished. I didn't ask for explanations, nor was I interested in her movements anymore. I just stopped giving her any version of myself that she could mistake for a second chance. That entire week, I slept in our bed, but I never touched her. I got up before her and went to bed after her. I didn't offer to prepare anything for her. I didn't bother to ask about her day. She noticed, quickly, but she was clueless on how to react. She tried to be overly nice. She spoke in a softer tone than usual. She'd suggest things like, we can go out for dinner on Saturday if you want, or we could get away for a few days. I didn't respond. I wasn't building a bridge back to her. I was preparing her downfall. On Thursday afternoon, I met with a lawyer friend of my brother's. We met in his quiet office, a discreet place with no signs on the door. I gave him every detail, raw and unembellished. The infidelity, the evidence, the GPS data, the note, the tracking. I told him I couldn't live with someone who had lied in such a structured, calculated way, that I would not spend another minute sharing time with someone who used my trust to betray me. He was direct. He laid out my options, what steps to take to keep the apartment, how to protect my assets, and how to file the divorce papers cleanly, without prior warning. He drafted the initial agreement and asked for the necessary data. We agreed that in less than a week, he would have everything ready to serve her. I didn't tell anyone yet, not my parents, not my friends, only Pablo, who had suspected something was wrong from the start. I told him everything over a beer near work. He listened without interruption. When I was finished, he just asked what exactly I wanted, revenge or closure. I told him both. Clara wasn't going to walk away from this as if it were a minor mistake. I wanted her to feel the weight of her choice, to understand what she had lost, and not be able to wipe the slate clean with some flimsy story. Pablo stood by me, as always, and offered to help in any way he could. I told him I'd need a more personal favor soon. On Friday, while Clara was in the shower, I went through her purse. I'm not proud of it, but I did it. I pulled out her wallet and found a folded receipt from the Industrial Park Hotel, dated the previous Saturday. It wasn't necessary, I already had the GPS data and the images burned into my memory, but it completed the file I had saved on my external drive. I also found a piece of paper with a phone number scribbled on it, no name. I kept it. A few hours later, I confirmed it was Javier, the bald guy's, number. Don't ask me how. It was a mix of social media detective work, quick searches, and just basic logic. I didn't do anything with it yet. That weekend, I forced a sense of calm. I suggested to Clara that we go out for lunch on Sunday, saying I needed a change of scenery. She seemed genuinely surprised, but accepted. We went to a restaurant we used to frequent, one of those neighborhood spots we had claimed as ours. During lunch, I asked her if she'd thought about our situation. She launched into a rehearsed speech, one of those that sounds good but is emotionally hollow. She claimed she wanted to fix things, that it was all just a misunderstanding, that it hadn't gotten physical with Javier, that it was merely an emotional connection, that she felt lonely and thought I didn't love her anymore. I didn't bother to argue. I just watched her speak. She was only giving me more reasons to act. Everything she said felt like a desperate attempt to justify the unjustifiable. When we paid the bill, I told her I needed a few days alone, that I was going to stay at Pablo's house to clear my head. She didn't protest. She said she understood. The next day, I began the final preparations. I called Pablo and asked him to help me stage a little scene. I wanted something quiet but devastating. At his apartment, which was empty because his girlfriend was traveling, we set up a room with a table, my laptop, 2 cameras, and a copy of the documents I was giving the lawyer. I also brought the hotel receipt and the printout of the GPS movements. I set up the cameras to record the conversation I'd planned, not for some internet spectacle, but because I needed an undeniable record of that moment, just in case she ever tried to rewrite the history. I sent Clara a message on Tuesday afternoon telling her I needed to see her that night, that it was urgent she meet me at Pablo's address. When she arrived, she was nervous, asking if everything was okay. I told her to sit down. I handed her an envelope containing the documents. She opened it and started reading, slowly, clearly not grasping what she was seeing. A few seconds later, she looked up, confused. "What is this?" "It's the beginning of the end," I replied. "Are you asking me for a divorce?" "I'm not asking you. I'm informing you. But don't you want to try to save us?" "We didn't try while you were lying. I won't keep trying while you pretend to be someone else." She stood up, taking a step toward me. "What if I tell you I'll stop? That I'll leave Javier? That I'll quit my job? That I'll start from scratch with you?" "It's too late. Can't you forgive me?" "It's not about forgiveness. It's about respect. It's about the fundamental thing you broke without a second thought." She fell silent. The cameras were rolling. I didn't look at them, but I knew every word was being captured, not for vengeance, but for the truth. Because this part, the part where she finally understood her lie had real consequences, was the only thing I truly needed to witness. When she left, she didn't hug me. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She just looked down and quietly closed the door. The next day, I signed the final papers with the lawyer. Clara didn't know it yet, but the official notification would be served to her on Friday morning, along with a copy of all the evidence I had collected. Clara received the divorce petition notification on Friday morning, right on schedule. At 11 o'clock sharp, my mobile rang. I didn't answer. She tried again 10 minutes later. Then she sent 3 text messages. The first asked if this was some sick joke, the second demanded we talk, and the third was a long, pleading message asking me not to make impulsive decisions, claiming we could still fix everything. I ignored all of them. I knew dragging out the conversation over the phone was pointless. These things need to be settled face to face, without the distance a screen provides, which always leaves room for more lies. I sent her one single text message that afternoon, telling her she could come to the house on Sunday at 6 p.m., and we would have our last conversation. She accepted without argument. On Sunday, I woke up early, cleaned the living room, organized the papers I needed to show her, and made sure there would be 0 distractions. No TV, no music, no talking to anyone. I spent the day with a focused, blank mind, waiting for the exact time to arrive. At 6:04 p.m., the doorbell rang. She wasn't wearing makeup. She was dressed simply, without any of her usual accessories. She walked in without a word. We sat facing each other at the dining room table. I let her break the silence. It took a few agonizing seconds. "I don't even know where to begin," she said in a barely audible voice. "You don't need to begin. Just listen," I replied, pulling the papers from the envelope and spreading them on the table. "This is what's going to happen. The legal process has started. There is no going back. It's not stopping. There are no more chances. There are no more options. For weeks, you were methodically lying to me, planning your outings, hiding your encounters, fabricating excuses to be with another person while sharing my bed. You did it with calculated precision. It wasn't a mistake. It was a constant choice. Therefore, there is nothing you can offer me now that will change any of this." "I didn't sleep with him more than once," she said, her voice trembling, hoping desperately that this small detail would somehow matter. "I don't care how many times. I care about everything you had to hide for it to happen. I care about the daily lies, the calm with which you returned home afterwards, your terrifying ability to act as if everything was fine. I care about knowing that while I was trusting you, you were busy making sure I wouldn't find out." She lowered her head. She wasn't crying anymore, but she had no defense left. She wasn't trying to justify anything. She was just sitting there, finally accepting what was coming down on her. I wondered for a second if she felt genuine shame, or just the fear of losing the comfortable life our relationship provided. I didn't know, and I no longer cared to ask. "And now what?" she asked after several long minutes of silence. "Are you leaving the apartment?" "No, I'm staying. It's mine. It's in my name. You're leaving. You have until Friday to find a place and get your things out. If you need help with transportation or need boxes, you can ask, but I'm not keeping any of your belongings. Not your memories, not your objects. Only the quiet peace of mind of knowing you no longer have a place in this house." "I truly didn't expect this from you," she whispered. "Well, you should have. If your plan was to cheat on me and then try to stay, you severely miscalculated. I am not one of those men who bows their head and pretends nothing happened. You broke the agreement, not just the marriage contract. You broke something that can never be rebuilt." "I don't want to lose you," she said, finally looking up. "Even if you don't believe it, I still love you." "I believe you, but that doesn't matter anymore. I don't want to live with someone who loves me like that. That kind of affection is useless to me. It's not love, it's dependency, and I no longer have any obligation to you. And if I give up everything? If I just leave and disappear? Perfect. As long as you comply with what the document says, you can do whatever you want. Doesn't any of this hurt you?" It already hurt. Now, I am simply carrying out the consequence. This isn't revenge. This is cleaning. I am taking the trash out of the house. She closed her eyes tightly. For a moment, I thought she was going to collapse, but instead, she stood up, went to the bedroom, and started quickly packing a few things. I didn't say anything to her. I just listened to the sounds of her opening drawers, stuffing clothes into a cloth bag, and closing the closet door. After about 30 minutes, she came back to the living room with the bag in her hand. She stopped directly in front of me. "I'll come back for the rest on Friday. I'll try to do it when you're not here," she whispered. "I don't care if I'm here or not. After Friday. Understood? Anything else?" "No." "Perfect." She left without a kiss, without a handshake, without saying a formal goodbye. She closed the door without making a sound. I sat in that exact spot for several minutes, not moving, just staring at the empty space where she had been. I didn't feel good or bad, just a profound sense of relief. I had done what I had to do. I had ended something that had been dead for a very long time, even if I hadn't realized it. That night, I slept alone for the first time in months. No tension, no nagging questions, no need to watch anyone. I slept with the serene certainty of having made the only possible decision. On Friday morning, just as we had arranged, Clara came back to collect the rest of her belongings. She arrived on time, face tight, and without makeup, accompanied by a friend who drove a small van. She didn't greet me when she came in, and I didn't greet her. I opened the door and stepped aside. They went straight to the bedroom without stopping, without speaking, without looking anywhere. For more than an hour, they were busy loading boxes, bags, and folders into the van. I didn't interrupt. I stayed in the living room with my laptop open, pretending to work, though I didn't touch a key. I just listened to every single movement, every step, every zipping sound, as if each noise marked the definitive end of an entire era. When they finished, Clara came over to me. Her friend stayed outside, respecting the moment. She stopped in front of the table with a folder in her hand. She put it down and said there were a few of her papers she didn't need, and she was taking all the rest. I simply nodded. She didn't move. After a few seconds of terrible hesitation, she spoke. "I honestly never thought it would end like this." "Neither did I," I replied, not taking my eyes off her. "But it was your decision. I didn't know you had changed so much." "I haven't changed. I just stopped tolerating what you never should have done in the first place." "I know I failed you. You don't have to repeat it. I'm not repeating it for you. I'm saying it for myself, so I don't forget. Do you think we can ever talk without this resentment?" "I don't know. Maybe. But I'm not interested in finding out right now." So this is it. This is what's left when one of the two stops respecting the other. Sometimes you make a mistake without meaning to destroy everything. And sometimes you make a mistake, and you have to live with the consequences. She didn't answer. She turned, walked to the door, and paused for one final second before leaving. "Despite everything," she said, "thank you for loving me the way you did." I didn't say anything. She closed the door behind her, and the deep silence rushed back into the apartment. That was the final, definitive end. There were no tears, no hugs, no absurd theatrics. Just one person leaving a house where she no longer belonged, and another staying, wrapped in the quiet peace of having finally cut off something that was impossible to fix. From that day on, the house felt fundamentally different. Not necessarily better, not worse, just mine again. Every corner still held a memory of what happened, but it was finally reclaiming its identity. I threw away the sheets, changed the curtains, and gave away some of the furniture we had chosen together. It wasn't spite. It was a desperate need to cleanse the space of a routine built entirely on lies. I talked to Pablo again. I told him it was officially over. He suggested we go out for dinner, to clear my head, but I declined. I wasn't ready to force a smile and pretend I was fine. I needed to process everything I'd lived through on my own terms, without rushing, without trying to be strong or seeking comfort. In the weeks that followed, I started noticing small, quiet changes in myself. I woke up earlier. I organized my time more efficiently. I worked with a renewed focus. It wasn't a feeling of wild liberation, but rather that I no longer had the weight of emotional distraction consuming all the space in my head. I still thought about Clara, of course, but the thoughts weren't laced with anger or sadness anymore. They were just part of a story that had simply finished. Some nights, I'd remember specific scenes, good moments, small gestures, phrases that had once marked our life. I didn't try to erase them. I just let them pass through me without dwelling on them too long. The most surprising part? I felt no hatred. I had expected a continuous stream of resentment, a constant need for revenge, but instead, I found a serene clarity, a practical acceptance of reality. Clara made her choices. I reacted with the necessary, cold forcefulness. Now, we each had to live with the wreckage. She with her guilt, and me with my peace. 2 months later, a mutual friend mentioned that Clara had quit her job, that she wasn't speaking to Javier anymore, and that she'd moved into a shared apartment in a different neighborhood. I felt nothing at all. I wasn't happy. I wasn't sad. I heard the news the way you hear any distant report. I didn't call to verify. I had zero interest in re-entering her world. I was only grateful to know it, just to confirm she was also living with the consequences. I still wondered if she truly regretted the betrayal, or if she only regretted losing the comfort we had. It didn't matter. It wasn't my problem anymore. One day, coming home from work, I walked past the restaurant where we had our last meal together. I stopped for a moment, looking through the window. I saw other couples sitting there, laughing, talking about things that might also be lies. I felt no nostalgia. I remembered that final scene the way you recall necessary paperwork, a moment where the outcome was already determined. I kept walking, bought myself some dinner, and went home. While I was eating, I thought about the profound lessons I had taken from the whole ordeal. They weren't self-help slogans or dramatic quotes. They were simple truths. You can never blindly trust anyone. Routine protects absolutely nothing. Betrayal always starts with tiny, insignificant-looking details. I learned that love alone is meaningless if loyalty is broken. A relationship isn't sustained by shared history. It is sustained by a clean, honest present. Now I live alone, but I am not lonely. I have rediscovered parts of myself that I had neglected, thinking they didn't matter in the context of us. I found the simple pleasure of doing things without having to justify them to anyone. I started reading again. I go for long walks with no destination. I've reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in years. I'm not waiting for someone new to appear. I'm in no hurry to fill the void. If someone comes, they will arrive when I'm whole and ready, not to patch up old wounds. If not, I am perfectly fine right here. The one thing that became absolutely clear is that you never fully know the person you live with, but you can decide how much of the unacceptable you are willing to endure. And I have made my decision, firmly and without a single glance backward. Because in this story, Clara ceased to be a part of the present, and I finally became a part of my own life. If the goal was only comfort, why did she choose to apologize with, "I still love you," only after she knew she had lost everything? Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Share your thoughts about this story in the comments.